have about another minute, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Welcome, everyone. We appreciate you joining us after hours or the last part of your day.
Good afternoon, everyone. Like Ashley said, thank you for joining us. And there's a few people still coming in. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll go ahead and get started, and I'll admit people as they join us. So I'm Amanda Afifi, Chair of Government Professional Relations, and thank you so much for coming to our TASP Talk, Legislation 101, and then a GPR update. And my co-host today, if she would like to introduce herself.
I'm Ashley Arnold. I am on the task board as historian, and if you're a NASP member, I am your delegate.
And again, thank you everyone for joining us. And so we'll go ahead and get started. All right. So just once again, thank you for joining us today, Legislation 101 and GPR update. And so I'll go over to Ashley. And just a quick reminder, if everyone can please stay muted. That way we're not getting any feedback or any other noises in the background. Thank you.
All right. And then Amanda, if you just wanted to put it in present mode, I can take it from there. Okay, so welcome everyone. So TASP, we decided to host this TASP Talk today because in case you haven't heard, we are in the middle of a legislative session here in Texas. So there's been a lot of recent activity and excitement around advocacy, which is new. I've been on the task board closing in on 20 years now, and I've been a former GPR chair as well. And so this is an exciting time for folks to participate in advocacy in Texas. So we kind of want to just first start off by providing just some legislation 101, how things work in Texas. Because as we all know, Texas is unique and different than the 49 other states. So first thing, we are currently in the 87th legislature. So that's always a little key too when you're looking at bills or someone is asking you, and if you can't find something, make sure that you're looking in the current legislative session, which we are currently in the 87th. So in Texas, our leaders have decided the legislative session is only every other year. And only basically January to May. So they've got to get a lot done in a short time span. Other fun facts about our legislative session in Texas is lawmakers actually can't pass any bills in the first 60 days. So kind of think about that. I already told you they only have 5 months to meet. And the first 2 months, by the Texas Constitution, they can't pass any bills. So that really means March to May is the busy time of the year. In addition, there is the deadline of March 12th. That's the deadline to file a bill. So basically the first 60 days are all about filing bills. And then we can't do anything about that until after March 12th. So how a bill actually becomes a law in Texas is actually quite complicated and not as easy as it seems. So while we won't bust out the Schoolhouse Rock video of how a bill becomes a law, it is quite helpful. So first thing, once a bill gets filed in Texas, it's either filed in the House or the Senate. And then that's step one. And then the bill, to make any movement, then the bill actually has to then get referred to a committee, whether it's the Public Education Committee, Juvenile Justice, Health and Human Safety Committee. So once we get referred to a committee, then we have to have a public hearing. And not every bill that gets filed, will get referred to a committee. Some bills just die right there. And then if they do get referred to a committee, they don't get scheduled for a public hearing. And so it dies right there. So as far as when to get excited about a bill, it's really a kind of a game of the long-term game. It's because we have the public hearing where you can give testimony, and TASP often gives written testimony or verbal testimony. Then it's got to get reported favorably out of committee. So those people on that public education committee have to vote and say, yes, we want to send this, we vote this bill favorably out of committee. If that happens, which a lot of our bills die in committee, because once they've had the public hearing where different groups can come and provide testimony, sometimes they just get stuck right there and the committee never votes it out. But if you get lucky and your bill gets voted out of committee, then it gets referred to the calendars committee. And there's actually 4 different types of calendars, and we'll show you that. Let's just go to it now, Amanda. So there's 4 different types of calendars. And which calendar your bill gets referred to is very, very important. What we hope for as far as bills that concern TASP, we're always crossing our fingers for what we call the local calendar, which is number 3 there, the local consent and resolutions calendar. Because in theory, this calendar is full of non-controversial bills. And so these bills generally speaking, kind of get sailed through if you get referred to that committee. Sometimes it can go either to the daily House calendar or the supplemental House calendar. But the easy peasy one is the local calendar, and that's what we want. So back on the previous slide, once you get referred to a calendar and the bill actually gets read 3 times, that's the other thing, is the bill has to have 3 readings in its chamber. Then it gets referred, and that's kind of what happens during the floor debate, is that's what's happening during the floor debate. It literally has to get read 3 different times. Like someone stands up in the House, reads the bill 3 times. If it gets through that and gets out of committee, then it goes over to the other chamber. So it's either, we start in the House, then it has to go to the Senate, and then it literally has to go through almost the exact same process all over again. So any bill in Texas, whether it originates in the House or the Senate, has to go through their respective chamber of having the hearings, going to calendars, having a floor debate. Then it goes over to the other chamber and they have to do their same exact process. So as you can see and can imagine, this is not a short process. And remember, I told you this process only happens from March to May. So that's why it's quite a busy season for us whenever it's the legislatures are in town. If we get lucky and the bill goes through both chambers, all bills then have to go to the governor. And then the governor can either sign it, veto it, or take no action. And then it becomes law after he takes no action. And so the reason we kind of wanted to start with this process is sometimes we get contacted by members to say, hey, TASP needs to respond to House Bill 1234. And sometimes it may be that TASP, we respond or we don't respond. As you can see, it takes a lot of effort from volunteers, because we're all volunteers at TASP. We all have day jobs as school psychologists. This is what we do in our free time, is advocate for you. And so as a general rule, we like to be very specific and targeted when we ask our members to reach out to your legislatures, because we're not going to ask you to call your representative as soon as we learn that a bill's been filed. Because hopefully now that you've seen the long, arduous process that it takes for a bill to become a law, if we ask you to contact your representative as soon as the bill's been filed, it's going to be months, several weeks before that bill gets any traction. And as you can see at different points along the way, the bill may die. And so kind of our first ask from our membership is generally once a bill gets scheduled for a public hearing in a committee, because that's kind of the first step that we have, that there's going to be some momentum on a particular bill. So when we look at particular bills, you'll see that there's all sorts of different types of bills. And Amanda can go to that slide. So obviously, the bill or a bill. So sometimes we get contacted and people will say, oh, there's a bill about, Kool-Aid being the state drink of Texas or something. And we'll actually look, and it's actually not a bill. It's a resolution. So there could be joint resolutions and just general resolutions. And as you can see, all sorts of different ones. These are ones that you see where we want to make, the first Monday in March, Ashley Arnold Day. That would be a resolution. That is not ever going to be a bill. You see where they honor different people, whether they honor Matthew McConaughey or different, the Texas Longhorns for winning a national championship. Those all happen via resolutions. So that's the other kind of key when you start to hear something's happening in the Texas legislature. You want to make sure it's actual bill and not a resolution. Bill is obviously binding. Resolution is not really binding. It's more honoring somebody or something like that. So on the next slide, you can see the reason we kind of want to walk you through the process is to show the amount of bills that get filed versus the amount that actually pass. So for this 87th session, they have filed just under 7,000 bills. Of course, we don't have yet how many passed, but as you can see, roughly only about 20% of the bills that get filed actually pass. So inherently, the odds are kind of stacked against you when you file a bill. I mean, the chances of a bill passing are very slim. Now, that's not to dissuade you from advocating or not, because grassroots advocacy really is the key for how a lot of these bills get passed. And when Amanda talks about some of the bills in particular during this session, you'll hear how it got started was because a local constituent just called up their representative and said, hey, I think this is a good idea. Will you file a bill? And they did it. So as you can see, it's something that we have to be, aware of as a professional organization that represents you, that basically only 1 in 5 bills actually ever pass. So that's something to kind of keep in mind too, when you get personally fired up about a bill that you may hear about in different media outlets as well. Hopefully the background that I've provided you today will encourage you to kind of dig a little deeper to find out where exactly that bill is in the process of becoming a law. We all know sometimes the media is not the best with their headlines as far as truth in advertising. And so this will help hopefully show you some ways to dig a little deeper and find out the exact status of a bill. And hopefully that will help your advocacy journey. All right, so Amanda's now going to take over and talk about kind of what this particular session looks like in the fun world of a global pandemic. She's going to talk to you about the TASP, our legislative agenda for this year, And then we're going to close it out with some bills that we think you may particularly find of interest. And then we'll leave some time for Q&A if you happen to have any questions about any of the bills we've talked about, or maybe bills we haven't talked about. Because as much as Amanda and I try to stay on top of it, bills always get through that we're not aware of, and we want to make sure we are monitoring those for our members.
Great. Yes, thank you, Ashley, for that brief update on a very complicated process that happens in a very short amount of time. And so, yeah, just some information about the legislator during COVID. And so the House and the Senate both came up with different COVID rules. And I will say at the beginning of the session, there were some members that tested positive, and so they did have to recess and then reconvene later. But as of now, you don't have to take a COVID test if you want to enter the Capitol. There may be some areas that are restricted that do require you to take a test, but as far as for us going and testifying at a hearing, we haven't had to take a COVID test. And then once you're in there, there is, at least in the room, they try to do spacing like that. They have some of the seats off. And then when people go give public testimony, most people will remove their mask in order to give the testimony, so they make sure they're heard clearly. Some of the things that we were first told was that there would be no virtual testimony, but that has changed. And so we did notice that some House committees are allowing virtual testimony. And when you look at the calendar and see what bills they're going to be hearing that day in that committee, at the bottom, it'll show whether or not they're allowing that virtual testimony and how you're able to access that option. The Senate is not. I will say the House definitely has a lot more options as far as being able to give a feedback for the general public. And then as far as masks, when you're in the Capitol, most people are wearing masks. There are a few who are running around that aren't wearing any masks. But like I said, most are, and they will take them off usually when they're up front at the podium testifying. So here's the 87th legislative agenda, and it is online on our TASP website. And so as you can see, try to make it very clear cut to the point to see exactly what areas we're looking at. So really improving access to comprehensive school mental and behavioral health services, improving access to school psychologists. Our ratios are pretty bad here in Texas and across the nation. And then as far as, just promoting best practices for safe and supportive schools, and then making sure we're doing all of that with that social justice equity lens. And then as far as the bill tracker, so we do have on our website a link to the NASP bill tracker. And so quickly show that. So when you click on the link, it'll take you to the NASP website. And then once you go ahead and click the state of Texas, it'll load the report. And there are quite a few bills that we are tracking. And so it does take a while for the report to load. One thing that I did notice on the report, though, is it is updating as far as where the bill is, whether it's been referred to a committee, it's been, if it's just kind of sitting there, or if it's been referred to a calendar committee. And so we'll see if this loads, or you know what, I have it here. I had it ready. So you can kind of see, like I said, the status, the title of the bill, who sponsored the bill, and the bill number. And when you click on these, it'll actually take you to the text of the bill. And then here it'll just kind of give you the update of the status of the bill, all the different levels it's been through already. And so you can see here it says 147 bills. There are a few on here that need to be added that I haven't added yet, but that I'm also tracking on my own. And so a couple of bills here that we're tracking that are very specific to school psychologists are House Bill 3667, relating to the establishment of the school psychologist shortage task force. And that came from Representative Busey. And so our president, Cassandra, and then our president-elect, Kelsey, and we did have a chance to stop by Representative Busey's office and speak to their chief of staff, and just expressed gratitude for the bill, and also letting them know whatever information they need from us, we're here to help. And they did say they would love to be able to work with us, especially if this passes. The other bill here is House Bill 3728. It's the name change. And so, changing from LSSP to school psychologist. And that one came from Representative Button. And we went ahead and stopped at her office as well and spoke to one of her staff members. And when we asked, hey, like what made you want to propose this bill? They said that they literally had one constituent who spoke to Representative Button about the name change. And the staff member said, like they're filing different bills. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, that one person asked us to file this bill. One person asked us to file this bill. And so she said, Representative Button was like, go, hurry, file it. And so they filed it. She didn't want to let that one constituent down because she said that she had made a promise to go ahead and file it. And so I think it was like Ashley or Cassandra mentioned, we have a school psychologist fairy this year, fairy godmother going in and getting these two bills for us. And so next up, here's just kind of a summary of what we've been tracking so far. And so if you can see here, there's 63 Senate bills. 7 were filed but have not been referred anywhere yet, or we'll see. 51 were referred to committee, and then 5 of those were referred to committee and had hearings. Out of that, only 1 has had a committee report printed and distributed, and that was literally, I just got the update today, probably like not even 2 hours before this talk. And then on the House side, there's 89 bills. All of them have already been referred to a committee. There have been 18 hearings. 12 have been specified as left pending in committee. 1 says no action taken. 1 was reported favorably without amendments. 1 was sent to the local and consent calendar. And then 3, it just says consent to calendars. There was 1 hearing scheduled today for a bill, and then there are 2 bills scheduled for hearings tomorrow and on the 1st.
And just FYI, the 2 school psychologist bills that Amanda just mentioned, they have just been referred to committee. That's it. That's where they are in the process. So they have not been scheduled yet for a public hearing, which is the next crucial step. And that's really when you do get an email from TASP saying that in particular, those 2 bills have been scheduled for public hearing. We'll be putting out an advocacy alert, and that's when we'll need you to call your legislature is during that time. So, sometimes we get the question of, hey, I hear there was a bill filed to finally change our name to what 48 other states call us. Why haven't you done anything about it? Well, it hasn't been scheduled for a hearing just yet. And so that's why I kind of wanted to start with the history and the background for why it may seem that TASP is not doing anything on a particular bill. A lot of times our hands are kind of tied by what the legislatures decide to do. So until they schedule it for a public hearing, there's really not a whole lot we can do. And I'll just remind everyone on the title change bill in particular, if you want to talk about what will be the #1 advocacy fight, it will be the title change. I can tell you that the Texas Psychological Association follows bills just as closely as TASP does, if not closer. And their members really respond to their call to action. And as you can imagine, they're going to oppose that bill, the name change bill. And to be perfectly honest with legislatures, it's a numbers game. If they get 500 calls or emails saying we oppose this bill versus 100 that say we're in favor of this bill, then that's what changes their mind. And then that's the attitude they take, is when they hear, what does most of the public say about a particular issue? And so that's why in years past, because every year, the title change has been on our legislative agenda for as long as I've been on the TASP board, and I said almost 20 years now. We fought it every session in a variety of different ways. Sometimes overtly when there's a bill that gets filed specifically with it, and then other times covertly when we might try to sneak it on the floor and then shove it into, tack it onto another bill during calendars debate. We try that method some years. And so this year, it looks like our method will be overtly with a specific bill, which is not a bad thing. But what we would encourage you is when you do get the advocacy alert for that particular one, encourage your colleagues, even if they're not TASP members, to contact their legislature for that particular one, because that's the only reason or how the route that things will change when it comes to a title change. So I just wanted to kind of put that in there and let people know that right now it's just been referred to committee. It's not had any traction yet.
Yes, thank you, Ashley, for bringing that up, because like you said, they both, well, Busey's bill for the shortage task force was filed on March 10th, and it was referred to the Public Education Committee on the 22nd. And then Representative Button's bill to do the name change was filed on the 11th, and it was referred to Public Health on the 22nd. And so, and those bills where I said that they've all been referred to committee, those last ones, I just got the update, I think it was yesterday, that they had all been referred to committee. So we still got a ways to go, but that doesn't mean we're not, doing anything on other bills. So here's what we've been doing so far. And so these are the bills that we've either testified in person or written. And so the first one here is House Bill 411. And literally it's just changing ARD to IEP. So instead of ARD committee, it would be IEP team. And so we went ahead and said, yes, we would like that change. When we first saw this, we thought, oh, maybe this one would be a good one if to do the name change in, sneak it in as an amendment, like Ashley was saying. But then once we saw that it was a bill, we were like, okay, well, we're still going to monitor this, and we're still going to go ahead and give testimony. And so that one has seen some traction, and Representative Johnson is the one that went ahead and submitted HB 411. And her office says they want to get it pushed over to the Senate as quickly as possible. And yeah, so on the 23rd, the committee report filed with the committee coordinator. Then the committee report was distributed, and it was sent to local and consent calendar. And so that's the update on House Bill 411.
Which is interesting because that bill has been filed in the 2 previous legislative sessions and not gone anywhere. So we weren't completely surprised when this one came back around again, because we've been monitoring it the previous 2 sessions, but maybe third time's the charm, because it's already gone to and is currently sitting at calendars. So that's some pretty monumentous change, because I don't think it's ever made it out of committee before. So that just goes to show, even if we're not successful one session, you try again in the next session.
Exactly. He said every year for how many years? Name change, right? This year. So House Bill House Bill 144. This one is just kind of doing a supplemental information on the IEP for kiddos who were receiving SPED services during these COVID school years. And so really the bill, the way that it's written, it's saying, hey, if you already did this and you in your ARD committee meeting, no need to have another ARD to fill out this supplement. But as your ARDs come up, why don't you go ahead and do this supplement? That way we can make sure we documented it, whether or not the student received an evaluation during COVID school years, also the different services that the student was provided, or if they were discontinued or kind of put on hold, and also just kind of helping to determine whether or not there's some compensatory services that the kiddo should be receiving. And so really when we looked at it, it's everything that we as school psychologists with the way that we are organized and take data and want to make sure we're not missing any deadlines, we've already been doing this. And so we were like, we are for this. That way, you know, we're not missing any kiddos. Also, it leaves a good paper trail for the teacher to kind of see, oh, maybe, you know, these services were discontinued and that's why they're struggling in this area. You know, we know there's a difference between the services kiddos have been receiving virtually versus in person as well. And so we thought this was a good one. And as far as pretty much everyone else has been in favor of this bill as well. And so for this one, right now it's just been left pending in committee. And so we'll see if this one goes anywhere. Next one is House Bill 1114, relating to providing mental health services and mental health education to public school students at school-based health centers. And so for this bill, when we look at it, really it's just specifically saying that mental health is health services. And so right now, the way that the code is written, it just pretty much is talking about health in general. And people feel like providing that specific mental health services in there is going to help in that definition to include that, because some people don't always look at mental health as a physical health thing. And so we did provide a comment at that hearing, and that has also been sent to calendars. And so we'll see where that one goes. Here's a few more bills that we have provided either written or testimony in this, the committee hearing. And so House Bill 2287, this one is, as you can see there, a collaborative task force on public school mental health services. And it's really to determine whether or not the data that we're collecting to see if these services are working. You know, we all know that we're all required to do certain trainings at the beginning of the school year, and they want to know whether or not some of these mental health ones are actually working and helping. And so I guess last session, they put together the public school mental health services task force. This is just kind of reinforcing, hey, we need to collect data and see how this is doing. And so we did go ahead and provide testimony on that one, and that one has been left pending in committee. The next two have also been left pending in committee. House Bill 2954, just a suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention program for certain public elementary school campuses. And so it would not require every elementary school campus to have suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention. It says, you know, it's for eligible districts. And as far as the school districts that would be eligible under this bill, any elementary school that has experienced at their campus, whether it was on or off campus, but also any schools that are experiencing a high level of students experiencing suicidal ideation. And so we went ahead and provided testimony for this one. Like I said, it's been left pending in committee. And then here, Senate Bill 412, that hearing was at the same time as a different one. And so I did just go ahead and mark us as for the bill. And it's really just so that we're able, you know, to continue providing services online and being able to get reimbursement for those services. And so now we'll go to some bills that we opposed. So House Bill 759. And this was to establish a threat assessment database, a student threat assessment database. And so pretty much anytime there was a threat assessment, they would need to include this student's information in this database up until they're 21. And so I mean, thinking about our little kids, you know, we're doing threat assessments for them, and then for their entire educational career, they're going to be on this suicide assessment database. And so obviously we had some major concerns about our students, and so we did oppose this bill. And I will say the majority of those people testifying were opposed. Really, right now, it was just kind of left there in the committee. And I will say, being there at that hearing, typically the bill sponsor will be able to speak on the bill first, you know, why they proposed it, what they were thinking. And then if the committee has any questions for them, they're able to ask those questions that moment. Well, the committee had plenty of questions about House Bill 759. Several members said that they had gotten some feedback from constituents saying that there were concerns about this threat assessment team or this threat assessment database and how it would negatively impact students and that school to prison pipeline. And so there were a lot of questions from the committee. And so I would say this one, might be left pending there based off of the way everyone was reacting. And then just a quick shout out to our member, Kimberly Mosley. She testified virtually at that hearing. We were all sitting there, we heard the name and we're like, no, we've heard that name before. And so just a shout out, see, members can testify as well. House Bill 822 now. So relating to requiring the expulsion of a public school student who engages in certain conduct that constitutes the felony offense of terroristic threat. Well, when you read it, you think, okay, felony offense of terroristic threat. Well, when you go into the actual text of the bill, they added one little specific tiny sentence where it says if it could be a misdemeanor, then they may also be expelled. And so we were concerned about that. When you look at the definition of terroristic threat, it could be something as some of our kids saying, they're going to bring a gun to school or they're going to bring a knife. That sets off certain things that we have to engage in, and some, if there's a gun involved, law enforcement might get involved to determine whether or not the student has access to that. And so it does kind of trigger some things that go under a terroristic threat. And so when we're talking about now misdemeanor and then being expelled from school for that, we know that that can also negatively impact not only our SPED kiddos, but also our Black and Hispanic kiddos as well. And so we did oppose this bill. And then Senate Bill 29, which is the Bathroom Bill 2.0. And so just, requiring public school students to participate in interscholastic athletic activities based on biological sex. And so we did go ahead and submit as well opposing this bill. And we included several, information about kind of the negative impacts that this would have on our gender nonconforming students. And so, and our transgender students. And so we just have a lot of, we're just worried about the kiddos and what they might experience and think about this bill as well.
And that bill, Senate Bill 29 today, got referred out of committee. So the committee has reported on that one. So that's one we'll be watching since the committee has voted that out. Now, I will say something as controversial in the media, such as this one, which they are effectively calling Bathroom Bill 2.0. It's something to be aware of, but we, cautiously aware of, because it's still got to go over to the House. And if you remember last legislative session, the House and the Senate had very different views about the bathroom bill. And so I imagine they will on this one as well. But that is one that just got referred out of committee today. And so we will be keeping a close eye on that, and especially if it gets referred over to the House, you may hear an advocacy call to action from TASP on that one once it gets referred to the other chamber for that one.
Thank you, Ashley. And so what if you personally don't agree with the position that TASP has taken? Because remember, TASP is TASP, the organization, but then there's also you as a person. And so what do? Well, you can advocate. And so like I mentioned earlier, when we were at one of the committee hearings, we actually heard a member testify of an opposition to a bill. And so remember, you can always advocate. If you don't agree with the TASP position, you can always advocate as yourself to members of the House and the Senate. And our new advocacy page we just put together. And so you can see here our TASP legislative platform at the beginning. This is the list of proposed bills. Yeah, that's better. Here are the list of proposed bills. Like I said, that's that NASP tracker. We have some advocacy tools. So if you want to know who represents you, to go ahead and send them something, click on who represents me, and it'll take you to this page where you put in your information, and it'll tell you every single person that represents you, federal and state level. The NASP Advocacy Action Center. So when we do those calls for action, we may ask you to go to the NASP Advocacy Center to do that, or we may ask you to go ahead and email specific member.
And I would encourage you to, if you don't already know who represents you, to go ahead and look that up today, write that down. Because one thing TASP does, especially when a bill, especially like the title change bill, for example, gets referred to committee, we will find out the members who are on, say, the Public Education Committee, for example. And we will likely target you if we find out that your member, your legislature is a member of that committee, because you know, there's lots of representatives in our legislature, but what matters is when a bill is before a particular committee, say the Public Education Committee, we want to know who those representatives are. And if it happens to be your representative, like for example, my House representative is John Busey. So once the shortages task force gets referred to committee, I'm going to become BFF with Representative Busey, and he doesn't even know that just yet. So he's looking forward to that. But that's the thing, is we want to find out if your representative is a member of a specific committee where our bill is being heard before. We really need you or your colleague that also lives in that same district. We especially need you to contact. It's helpful if everyone contacts their legislature, but frequently what you're here when you contact a representative's office and their staffer who's just out of high school answers the phone, they're going to want to say, they'll look it up and they'll say, oh, this bill is still in committee or hasn't made it to committee, call us back, type thing. And so that's why it's really important for you to know who your representative is, because it helps to make those connections, not just during legislative session, but TASP actually does a lot of work, what we call non-legislative sessions. That's what we spend our time building those relationships with different legislators. So when they do get that call or when they do get that ask from TASP, they're more inclined to support our request.
Yeah, so like Ashley said, he doesn't know that she's gonna be his new BFF, and homework for everyone. Go ahead and see who your representatives are, and like Ashley said, see if they're serving on a committee, if they're a committee chair even. That's all important information to know. And then as far as back to the advocacy page, NASP infographics. So in case you want to be sharing some of these infographics with some of the members, these are a quick, easy way to show different data, and there's such a variety of infographics on here. Back to here, how a bill becomes a law is just back to that graphic again of that complicated process of how the bill becomes a law. Here's the NASP 2020 voter education guide. So, I guess that one's not working yet. We'll make sure we get that one up. Obviously we want to always refer to data when we're testifying or when we're providing a comment. It's good to have sometimes, it's good to have those personal stories, but also it's good to have data as well. And so here's Kids Count Data Center. So we can kind of see this page as well. It'll take a while. And so you can kind of see just some demographics and things like that. This one is specifically on LGBTQ students in Texas. And so we did refer to some of the data in here when we provided testimony for that Senate bill. And then this is a really nifty little graphic that our past president, Stephanie, had been working on. And so you can kind of see here licensees by county. And so, you can see there's a lot of spaces out here where there are no school psychologists living. And then, really it's just the major cities that have us, and everywhere else, I'm sorry, all rural school psychologists have a lot of area to cover. But this is, you know, a great tool that to use, especially when, you know, hopefully that task force, the shortage task force, is up for a hearing. We can go ahead and provide this. And so, yeah, and, you know, we're going to be adding more to this advocacy page. We want to include different things that members will really find helpful. So if y'all have any suggestions on things that you feel like would be helpful on the page, feel free to email me about it, or bring it up now too if you want, or pop it in the chat. Anything you feel like would be beneficial to have as well. And so that's our TASP Talk. So we got 15 minutes.
So we're happy to take any questions. You can unmute yourself and ask any questions, or even just comment to say, hey, good job, or hey, crappy job, do more. We take both good and bad feedback. We're happy to listen to constructive criticism. And really, as your professional organization, we're here for you. And so if there's a particular bill that maybe you've heard about through your work, or just your other, you know, social media outlets or friends, or I'd say when you're out gathering with others, but we're not really doing that right now. You know, just, you know, we're happy to, you know, take member feedback, because your membership dues pay for this, pay for advocacy. And we want to make sure your voice is heard and your needs are met through legislation. So, yeah.
I have a question. And by the way, I do want to commend you and say thank you so much for all of your work. And I don't know how you guys can do this on top of our job, but I appreciate it. I just wanted to go back, because in the beginning you talked about the first two. One was changing of the name, and the other one was the School Psychology Shortage Task Force. And I just wanted, because in my notes, then I have a separate section of the issues that were for and opposed. And I know that we're for those two, but I just wanted to check, are we supposed to take some action right now on those two, or you were just highlighting them?
Not just yet. Right now, we're just highlighting them because they're popular topics. Those are the ones that get people excited. So I like to kind of joke, if we remember back to a previous legislative session when they wanted to mess with the 45-day timeline, that got people riled up. And that was when we heard from most of our members was on that particular bill. So we're hoping this is, you know, by telling you about the title change and the shortages task force is kind of a preview coming attraction type thing. Stay tuned. We want to get you primed so that when we do have that call to action, we need the numbers. That's honestly what it comes down to, is a numbers game. So right now, we don't have an ask of anybody right now for the title change or the shortages task force. Obviously, TASP is in favor of both of those bills. We will be highly supporting those, but right now we do not have an ask for those two bills right now.
I would like to provide an update to House Bill 3728 that I literally just got while we were on this call. Representative Button's office reached out by email to say they are working on getting a hearing date scheduled. And that's great news, because like Amanda and Ashley have said, that's one of the big battles to getting traction on a bill. So we've got their office working on getting that hearing scheduled. So hopefully we'll have a call to action for you soon.
And, you know, you can always also, like, we're going to monitor the bill, and we're going to, you know, it'll be updated on that NASP tracker, but I understand there's a lot of bills on there as well. And so there, you are also able to go ahead and monitor bills on your own and add them to your tracker too, if you want to get those notifications. And so let me share my screen and I can do that on here. So I have this saved on my desktop. The 87th legislature regular session, like Ashley said, it's always important to make sure that you have the correct year. And here it'll show all the years, so make sure you're at the right one. bill number. And so for example, let's go ahead and look at that bill. House Bill 3728. And when you click on it, it pops right up. And so it'll show you when it's filed, the first time they read it, and then what committee it was referred to. Here again, the brief caption, the author of the bill, and kind of the subjects, and again, the committee. If you wish to add an alert, you would click here to add to alert list. And you do need to have a profile in order to do that, which is something really simple to set up as well. And so like once you log in, you can make a new account. It's like I said, it's super easy to make an account. And then once you log in, you literally click the add to alert list. You can come up with a nice little title for you to remember what it is. So then that way, when you get the alert in your email, you're like, oh, okay, that's what it is. Because some of those caption text might not always really show the full bill. Yeah, and so here it'll show you the text of the bill. And so really, like this one is just changing LSSP to school psychologist. It'll show you any action, again, the authors, and then the bill stages. And so, I mean, it doesn't have really all these, but just so you can kind of see where we're at, we're all the way here at the beginning. Neat. Any other questions or comments? And like Ashley mentioned earlier, if you're on the NASP tracker and you see that, you know, there's not a bill on there, reach out and let us know. You know, if you feel like it's something we should be tracking, feel free to email, you know, and me specifically, or even just the task board if you can't, you know, if that's easier. And we'll go ahead and make sure we track that one as well. And I have gone through and made alerts for every single bill that we're tracking on NASP, whether or not we're going to provide a comment, because some of those bills really, once we look at them, they have nothing to do with us. So. I guess if no one has any other questions, looking through the chat.
And then I would just make a plug. If we got you fired up about the legislative process, Amanda's always looking for members of her GPR committee, which just helps us to have more people tracking it, the availability to provide either written testimony or, you know, submit testimony via Zoom, if, you know, depending on that. So there's lots of ways that you can volunteer with TASP. So if we've ignited a passion with you for legislative activities, I will say it takes a village. So we definitely appreciate volunteers and anybody that wants to help. Also, if you have any sort of personal connection to any legislature, please email Amanda. We would like to know this as well. That's generally who we look upon favorably when we are seeking a bill sponsor. But even for some of these bills that have already been filed, it helps if you happen to have a personal connection through Rotary, Kiwanis, church, you know, you went to high school with this person, you know, no connection is too small when it comes to the Texas Capitol, we've learned. So if you do have any connections or that, please reach out to Amanda. We're always looking for more volunteers, and Amanda can put her email in the chat so you can reach out to her for that, because it takes a village. And as you know, Texas is very big. And what we've learned is it matters not so much that they hear the voice of different trade organizations, but they hear the voice of their own constituents. And so that's what they really like to hear from you. And so we appreciate you being here today. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Amanda or myself.
And I went ahead and dropped my email address in the chat. And like Ashley said, if you want to volunteer, let me know. And if there's a specific like area of interest in this legislative session that you would prefer to be on, let me know too, because that also helps. Sometimes get people wanting to help, but then I don't know where to put them because there's such a variety of bills, and I would love to be able to make sure that it's something that you're passionate about. So Thank you everyone for being here, and it's so nice to see people, even if it's just on Zoom. All right, thank you everyone.